I slammed the cafe door shut just as the health inspector's clipboard hit the counter with a thud that echoed through the empty morning rush. His badge glinted in the pale sunlight streaming through the front windows. "I'm sorry, Ms. Dawson," he said, voice crisp. "You have to close immediately, failure to maintain proper sanitation." The notice was clipped to a bright yellow violation sign that fluttered like a wounded flag. Before I could stammer a response, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I glanced down and my heart lurched, an anonymous text showing me an image I never imagined I'd see. Me leaned into Marcus and Gwen at last Sunday's Mommy and Me brunch, our coffee cups nearly touching, his hand sliding possessively along my forearm. In that split second, my thriving Silver Lake dream turned to ash. Morning sunlight painted the counterculture cafe in warm amber, but I saw only the rising panic. My daughter Harper stood at my side, clutching her stuffed bunny, eyes wide and confused. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she asked, voice small against the inspector's quiet but unwavering gaze. I forced a smile, knuckles white as I locked the phone. "Just a small delay, sweetie. Go play by the window." Her footsteps echoed as she padded away toward the high stools, leaving me alone with the inspector's looming presence and that damning photo frozen on my screen. A year ago, this cafe was my heart's greatest triumph, exposed brick walls lined with succulents, hand-painted chalkboard menus, and that rumble of espresso machines as regulars chatted about life. My husband Ryan used to joke that I'd built my empire while he chased his stalled screenwriting dream in our tiny loft just blocks away. But over time, his half-hearted encouragement gave way to distracted scowls as I celebrated every latte I perfected. Now, seeing Marcus, our brunch regular and single dad, smiling at me like I was the only woman in Los Angeles, I felt both exhilarated and terrified. The inspector pushed the violation notice across the counter. It read in bold letters, "Emergency closure, critical sanitation violation. Immediate cessation of operations required." The words burned, but I knew the closure wasn't random. Someone knew about the cracked tile under my prep sink, where I'd patched a leaky drain last week. That patch had gone through its final test in this morning's surprise visit. I took a shallow breath, fighting the urge to collapse. "Is there an appeal process?" I managed, voice cracking. The inspector shook his head, pen tapping the form. "Not until after you rectify these issues, and that could take weeks." He turned and exited with clinical detachment, leaving me standing amid half-brewed lattes and polished countertops now dusted with the specter of failure. My stomach twisted as I pictured the photo being circulated, neighbors whispering as they scrolled on their phones, competitors smirking behind their own counters. I locked my phone and pocketed it, banning myself from looking again. I gathered the inspection notice, stapling it to the front door. Customers who peeked in saw the bright, closed sign and murmured, "What happened to counterculture?" My heart fluttered, but there was no time to explain. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling its once proud logo sting against my skin. Behind me, espresso machines clicked off and stools slid back as neighbors backed away. I sank onto a bar stool, head in my hands, fighting nausea. In my mind, I replayed every Marcus-laced moment, his warm laugh when I served him my signature lavender latte, his eyes, dark and steady, when he asked, "Need a hand, Jessica?" I brushed it off as friendly encouragement, the kind of camaraderie that fueled my creativity. But that photo told a different story, one of intimacy, betrayal, and reckless choices. Through the cafe's windows, a stranger paused on the sidewalk, snapping their own photo of the yellow violation notice. My vision blurred as realization struck. Today was the day my loyalty, to husband, business, and myself, fractured irreparably. I slid off the bar stool and, with shaking fingers, snapped a final photo of the closed sign for my records. A tear slid down my cheek as I whispered to the empty cafe, "What have I done?" Then I stepped into the harsh sunlight, the door closing behind me with a decisive click that felt like the end of everything I once believed. I remember the early days of our loft in Echo Park, how sunlight filtered through the bay windows as Ryan paced across the living room, tapping on his laptop and muttering about his latest script draft while I arranged tables for our first pop-up cafe event. Those weekends felt electric. He would read me his dialogue over clinking espresso cups, I would taste his character's coffee, and we'd exchange ideas until late, balancing my cafe ambitions with his screenwriting dreams. I loved how he believed in me, even when his own writing stalled. I curated our menu of single-origin brews and avocado toast, and he dreamed up scenes of neon-lit Los Angeles nights where a character like me might serve midnight cappuccinos to hungry filmmakers. Back then, our worlds intertwined seamlessly, each success feeding the other. But as months passed, Ryan's enthusiasm for cafe life dimmed. He'd stare at his blinking cursor, frustration shadowing his bright blue eyes, while I buzzed through morning shifts preparing lattes for early bird regulars. Our conversations transformed from shared dreams to silence punctuated by the hiss of the espresso machine. I'd invite him to taste new pastry recipes, cardamom brioche, lavender honey scones, but he'd decline, murmuring, "Not hungry," before retreating to our bedroom, where the laptop screen glowed like a lifeline I couldn't reach. I tried to soothe him, suggesting coffee breaks in the patio, reminding him of our first brainstorming session under string lights, but he only offered hollow smiles and assurances, "I'm fine. You go crush it at the cafe." That growing distance created a vacuum I didn't know how to fill, until I met Marcus and Gwen at a Sunday Mommy and Me brunch hosted at a nearby co-working space. I had taken Harper along in her polka dot dress, hoping a change of scenery would cheer both of us. The long tables were covered in pastel tablecloths, and mothers chatted over lattes while toddlers played with wooden blocks on the floor. Marcus, a single dad in a crisp chambray shirt and perfectly tousled hair, sat across from me, tasting honey-drizzled croissants and offering me constructive feedback on the new cinnamon latte I was sampling. He asked insightful questions about bean origins and latte art, praising my technique with such warmth it felt like the first time someone truly appreciated the heart I poured into every cup. I'd always been proud of Counterculture Cafe, its reclaimed wood counters, the hand-lettered chalkboard menu, the community board plastered with local event flyers, but Marcus's genuine interest in my craft was intoxicating. He reminded me of the passion I once shared with Ryan, and I found myself craving more of his company. At the end of that brunch, he lingered, offering to carry my pastry boxes to the car. His hand brushed mine as he set them down, an electric jolt that made my heart tremble. I forced a polite smile and thanked him, but inside I felt a stirring of something untamed. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a fixture at my cafe, always stopping by for his morning cold brew, leaning in to chat about coffee bean single origins, or risking laughter as he helped Harper stack sugar packets into mini pyramids. Ryan noticed my frequent mentions of Marcus in conversation, how he texted me photos of artisanal beans or suggested latte pairing ideas, but he mostly shrugged, distracted by plotting a revenge horror script he kept insisting was going somewhere. I tried to include him. "Marcus has this idea for a coffee collaboration," I'd say, but Ryan's eyes would glaze over as he muttered, "I'll come by when I can," knowing he never would. As my nights with Marcus extended beyond tasting sessions, into clandestine behind-the-counter meetings after closing, I convinced myself these moments were merely innocent professional collaborations. We'd whisper recipes while wiping down espresso machines, and his close-up instructions on latte art felt thrilling in a way Ryan's occasional nods at my work no longer did. One evening, Marcus pressed a warm palm against the small of my back as he guided my hand through the final swirl of a latte heart. Time slowed, the clink of milk pitchers faded, and I tasted the sweetness of deception. Amid these stolen moments, rumors swirled among local cafe owners that someone had anonymously tipped off the health department about a sanitation issue, a cracked grout line under my prep sink that leaked water when the drain backed up. I rushed to patch the hole, disinfecting every surface, but the inspector's whistle blew just as I replaced the final tile. I suspected Marcus knew my cafe's weak points. After all, he'd helped me rearrange kitchen storage the week before, and his knowing smile that evening when I mentioned the impending inspection made me uneasy. I told myself I was overthinking, that he wanted only to help me succeed, but a knot of doubt had taken root. At home, Ryan grew increasingly distant. He spent nights hunched over his keyboard, the blue glow illuminating his weary face. I tried to discuss the impending health violation scare, expecting his support, but he brushed me off. "I'm dealing with my own deadlines," he'd replied, voice hollow. His silence stung more than any inspector's citation, and I found myself seeking solace in Marcus's attentive concern. When Marcus offered to cover the cafe during the scheduled re-inspection, insisting he knew the right person to speak with, I hesitated but eventually agreed. I rationalized that I needed to trust someone, and who better than a friend who understood my passion. Late one night, as I cleaned milk frothers behind the bar, I noticed my phone buzzing with a new notification, an email with subject, Health Department Inquiry. I opened it with trembling fingers and saw the inspector's official letter, closure notice until further notice. My heart sank. I remembered Marcus's final reassuring smile the day before, and a chill crept through me. I realized our collaborative closeness had morphed into something darker. Someone close to my world had orchestrated my downfall. My chest tightened as I stared at the closure notice, recognizing the sting of betrayal not just from the health department's letter but from the man I'd trusted above all. In that moment, I understood that, between Marcus's magnetic charm and Ryan's quiet abandonment, I had lost my sense of self, and everything I had built hung in the balance. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with Marcus shifted from professional camaraderie to something far more intoxicating and perilous. It started innocuously enough. He'd linger after his morning cold brew, offering to help me reorder the espresso bar shelf or suggesting I try single-origin beans from a local roaster. I welcomed his company. Ryan, once so attentive, had become a ghost in our loft, lost in endless rewrites and frustrated sighs. Marcus, in contrast, laughed at my anecdotes when I described Ryan's latest dialogue experiment and actually asked me to teach him the secret behind my signature lavender honey latte. I told myself it was just mentorship, that nothing deeper existed, but every time he pressed a damp cloth into my hand or brushed an errant strand of hair from my face, my pulse spiked. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I slipped into the cafe kitchen at 3 p.m., thinking I was alone, and found Marcus hunched over the counter, meticulously cleaning his camera lens. I'd left Harper with a babysitter to finish inventory, and now, in the dim back room, the scent of espresso and the hiss of steam from the boiler mingled with something electric. Marcus glanced up, eyes lighting at the sight of me. "Hey, Jess," he said softly, voice low enough to be mistaken for part of the machinery's hum. "I wanted to show you these shot angles for the new menu shoot." He handed me his camera, weighty and warm. I knelt beside him, and as we reviewed the photos on the LCD screen, close-ups of latte foam swirls, caramel-drizzled croissants in golden sunlight, our knees brushed. The jolt of contact sent a shiver up my spine. My cheeks warmed, but I convinced myself it was just the heat of the boiler behind me. I handed the camera back and forced a casual smile, but the tension between us lingered long after I'd left the kitchen. That evening, after closing, I texted Ryan, working late on tomorrow's pastry order. "Come by when you can." He replied with a curt, "Understood," and I felt the familiar pang of abandonment. I put Harper to bed, kissed her forehead, and slipped my apron back on, telling myself I'd just need one more push to get the cafe's special vanilla bean scones perfect. I locked the front door, made sure the ovens were off, and crept to the back room where Marcus was waiting by the prep table, 2 steaming cappuccinos in hand. He handed me one, fingertips brushing mine as I accepted it, and our eyes met. "I've missed your latte art," he said quietly, voice thick with something tender. I lifted the cup, inhaled the frothy aroma, and took a slow sip. My chest fluttered as I realized there was more to this moment than coffee. We spent that night talking about our childhoods, our dreams, the hollow ache we both felt from partners who couldn't see our worth. He told me about co-parenting struggles, how juggling brunches with his 3-year-old son and freelance photography gigs left him craving genuine connection. I confessed how Ryan's faltering screenwriting career made me insecure, how every time he brushed off my cafe's success, I felt an emptiness grow inside me. As the coffee's warmth spread through my chest, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in months. When his hand found mine again, I didn't pull away. I let him cradle my fingers, and in that touch, something broke inside me, the barrier between loyalty and longing shattered like a dropped mug. In the weeks that followed, our rendezvous became routine clandestine meetings tucked into cafe hours. We'd slip into the back room when the lunch crowd thinned, I'd lock the door, and Marcus would close his camera bag. The aroma of freshly ground beans became our signal, the hiss of the steam wand was our lullaby. He taught me new latte techniques, microfoam dancing under my fingertips, and I taught him how to balance flavors, how a pinch of cardamom could reframe an entire espresso shot. Our coffee-fueled sessions blurred into late-night confessions, lips brushing over shared scones, laughter muffled against date-sweetened croissants, and stolen kisses beneath the fluorescent glow of the kitchen overhead lights. Meanwhile, cracks appeared everywhere else. After one particularly long tasting session, I returned home at 2 a.m. to find our loft's front door open. Ryan stood on the threshold, arms folded, staring at me like I'd just stepped off stage during his film premiere. "Where have you been?" he demanded, voice tight. I stammered an excuse. I was closing up at the cafe and working on the new pastry menu, but he didn't buy it. His eyes burned with suspicion. I wrapped my arms around myself, ashamed, and he walked past me without another word, disappearing into our bedroom. That night, I lay beside an empty pillow, the scent of Marcus's cologne still clinging to my coat, and I cried. I had never felt so alive and so hollow at the same time. At the cafe, rumors began to swirl about an anonymous tip to the health department. I overheard Marcus getting a call from a city inspector friend, "Just double-check that cracked tile under her sink. They'll look there first." My skin prickled. I'd shown Marcus every inch of my kitchen, trusted him implicitly during our secret shoots. Now, I realized, someone was weaponizing my vulnerability. Panic and shame coiled in my gut as I remembered that loose tile in the corner, an overlooked patch job I'd done to prevent water from seeping into the cabinetry. I rushed to skin the kitchen floor. The grout line was damp, and a thin film of mildew had formed around the edges. I scrubbed and bleached until my hands stung, but I knew deep down the inspector's report had already been filed. That afternoon, as I restocked the pastry case, I texted Marcus, "We need to talk. Now." He replied almost immediately, "I'm on my way." When he arrived, his eyes were grave. "Jess," he said, voice strained, "I tried to pull the tip back, but it's too late. They already went through last week's lunch rush. They'll be back tomorrow." My heart lurched. Betrayal ripped through me, not just from the cafe closure but from the men whose touch once felt like redemption. "Why?" I whispered, tears welling. Marcus's jaw tensed. "I needed leverage," he confessed, voice rough with regret. "I thought if you had nowhere else to turn, you'd need me." My world constricted around me. I saw the flicker of desperation in his eyes, the same desperation I had felt as I watched Ryan retreat behind his screen. In that back room, as the hiss of the espresso machine buzzed around us, I realized the lesson: the taste of betrayal, once swallowed, never goes down smoothly. I pulled away from Marcus, feeling the sting of each breath. My mind reeled with the juxtaposition of our love, so sweet at first sip, and the poison he had mixed into my world. With shaking hands, I scrubbed away the last fleck of cardamom from my fingertips, knowing I would need every ounce of strength for what came next. I arrived at Counterculture first thing the next morning, only to find the "closed for health violations" sign plastered across the door, and a cluster of concerned regulars lingering on the sidewalk, snapping photos with their phones. My stomach convulsed. As I pushed through the door, the cafe felt cavernous without its usual hum. Tables sat empty, and the espresso machine sat silent, the only sound a faint drip from the cracked grout line under my prep sink. I dropped my keys on the counter, heart pounding. The inspection report lay face up: immediate closure, severe sanitation breach. I sank onto a stool and ran trembling fingers through my hair, replaying Marcus's words, "I needed leverage. They already went through last week's lunch rush. They'll be back tomorrow." Rage and hurt coiled in my chest. By late morning, I tracked Marcus down at a downtown apartment he'd occasionally rented for shoots. The hallway smelled of stale takeout as I hesitated outside his door, phone in hand. My fingers trembled as I knocked. Marcus opened the door, surprised to see me so early, cafe apron still draped over my arm. "Jessica," he began, but I cut him off without waiting for an invitation. "Why would you do this?" I spat, stepping inside. His eyes flickered to the floor. "I tried to stop it," he said quietly, "but it was already in motion. I thought if you lost everything, your business, your marriage, your faith in Ryan, you'd come to me for help." A hollow laugh escaped me. "You sabotaged my livelihood to make me dependent on you." I stepped closer, fury skimming the air between us. He flinched, but met my gaze. "I loved you, Jess." I thought, his voice cracked, but no apology could undo the damage. I reacted on instinct, grabbing the photo of us entwined at that brunch. Marcus had printed it earlier, as he'd threatened, and tore it in half. The scraps fluttered to the floor like broken promises. "You never loved me," I hissed. "You loved possessing me." He took a staggered step backward. I turned and left, the door slamming behind me like the final chord of our betrayal. By midday, I was back at our loft, hobbling up the narrow staircase to find Ryan waiting in the living room, arms crossed, anger etched in every line of his face. His gaze locked on my cafe apron hanging over a chair. His voice was a low roar. "So it's true. You've been sleeping with him." The photo I'd abandoned on the sidewalk that morning had made its way to him via a mutual friend. I stood stiffly, meeting his glare. "Yes," I said, voice steady despite the ache rippling through me. "And he destroyed my cafe because he knew I'd come running to him." Ryan's disbelief melted into a bitter edge. You threw away everything we built, he accused, voice taut. Our loft, our routines, our lives, gone. He brandished the torn photo between us like evidence. All because you needed someone to believe in your latte art more than you believed in me. My chest tightened. You weren't there for me, I countered, swallowing the lump in my throat. You ignored my success, retreated into your screenplays, and left me alone. Marcus was the only person who saw me. Ryan's shoulders sagged as though the weight of his own failures pressed him down. I should have been there, he whispered. I was drowning in my own misery and didn't notice yours. He dropped to his knees, eyes brimming with hurt. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. But the damage was done. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not for him, but for the life we'd lost. He rose slowly, avoiding my gaze. I have to go, I murmured, knowing there was nothing left to say. I stepped past him toward the door, sinking the key into the lock behind me with a final click. Outside, the afternoon sun felt harsh against my skin. I realized that in seeking solace with Marcus, I destroyed my cafe, fractured my marriage, and lost my sense of self. As I walked away, I didn't look back. The empty sidewalk stretched in front of me, a road of shattered dreams leading toward an uncertain horizon. Weeks passed in a fog of phone calls, paperwork, and sleepless nights. I moved into a tiny studio above a thrift shop, bare walls, a single stool, and a second-hand espresso machine that sputtered whenever I turned it on. Every day, I woke to the hum of traffic outside my window, a reminder that life carried on whether I was ready or not. I spent mornings scouring local newspapers, piecing together Marcus's next photo gig and cross-referencing it with his social media to confirm details. By afternoon, I drafted a scathing exposé for my blog, Bean Counter, How a Betrayal Brewed My Downfall. I compiled all the evidence, Marcus's admission in my back room, the health department tip that shuttered counterculture, and his calculated moves to force me into his orbit. I paired each accusation with screenshots, restaurant receipts, and recorded voice memos from my tearful confrontation with him. As I typed the closing lines, some baristas serve coffee, others serve reckoning, I felt a flicker of power I hadn't known in months. At midnight, I hit publish. Within hours, local food blogs picked up my post, and patrons of nearby cafes shared it widely. Don't drink Marcus's artisanal coffee, read one headline. I watched his reputation unravel in real time. Clients canceled contracts, the co-working space revoked his studio keycard, and his Yelp ratings plummeted. In a matter of days, Marcus's so-called magnetic charm morphed into a cautionary tale of greed and manipulation. Meanwhile, Ryan visited once, handing over a small cardboard box containing my espresso machine parts and a battered cookbook of his first draft, pages flipped back to a handwritten note, for Jess, who believed in every word. He gazed at me with gentle sorrow and said, I'm proud of you. He left without another word, and I realized I no longer yearned for reconciliation, I only wanted to rebuild. Armed with my reclaimed confidence, I partnered with the community center where I once taught latte-making workshops. We converted an old storeroom into a pop-up cafe, Phoenix Roasters, with reclaimed wood counters and a chalkboard reading, rising from the ashes, one cup at a time. I revamped my signature lavender honey latte, adding a dusting of toasted rosemary for resilience. Weekends, I invited local parents and creatives to bring their kids for story and sip sessions. I read children's books while they sipped hot chocolate, then demonstrated latte art on my own machine. Harper, now 6, perched on a high stool beside me, handing out pastries she helped me bake earlier that morning, mini banana breads and almond biscotti. Late one Friday, as I wiped down the counter, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Marcus stood there, eyes red, clutching a manila envelope. He muttered, I want to apologize. I nodded, bracing myself for deceit, but he dropped the envelope on the counter and fled. Inside were copies of invoices showing he'd quietly paid the cafe's back rent, fines, and the outstanding health department fees, enough to reopen counterculture under a new name, should I choose. A final receipt, paid in full. My breath caught. I closed the lid and turned away before he could see my face. That night, I posted a short note on Phoenix Roasters' chalkboard wall, closure comes in many forms, today, sweet and unexpected. As I locked up, the smell of fresh espresso clung to my apron, mingling with the faint memory of betrayal. I stepped outside into the cool night air, Harper's laughter echoing behind me as she chased streetlights dancing across the pavement. I exhaled, tasting freedom and possibility on my tongue, knowing that, even after the bitterest brew, there is always room for a new beginning.